Okay, as you just heard, I've begun our recording. As we begin our gathering tonight, we acknowledge that we are each attending remotely from the homelands of many different tribal nations. I myself am currently on the ancestral homeland of the Nooksack, the Swinomish, and the Lummi tribes, as well as additional federally recognized and unrecognized Indigenous people. We pay respect to these people, past and present, and extend that respect to their descendants and to all Indigenous people. If you at home happen to know the names of the tribes whose ancestral homelands you're on, I would encourage you to type those into the chat now so that we can all see where folks are from and see some of those names recognized. I'll give you a minute for those to come in. I'm seeing Salish, Lummi, Nooksack, Puyallup, federally unrecognized Duwamish people, absolutely. Jamestown, Clallam, Snohomish, Tulalip, Stillaguamish, Wenatchee, Salish, Cowlitz, Muckleshoot, Yakima Nation, Nisqually, Puyallup, Squaxin Island, Swinomish. Excellent. Okay. Great, thank you everybody for typing those in. Feel free to type those if you remember them a little bit later on. Feel free to put those in there. Okay, so as I mentioned, my name is Evan Holmstrom. I'm a program coordinator with North Cascades Institute. North Cascades Institute's mission is to inspire environmental stewardship through transformative experiences in nature and sometimes transformative experiences in your own home via virtual programming. I'm really excited to work with Chevon tonight. She was referred to me by our education manager, Molly Harrigan, who met her via the Washington Trails Association. So there's a strong community there, and I was happy to make a connection with Chevon and see if she was interested in working with us virtually. I was really glad that she wanted to facilitate a topic like this for us tonight. So I am very grateful to Chevon, and I want to hand things over to her right now. So everybody, please welcome Chevon Powell.
Thank you, Ian. I'm super excited to be here. I kind of gave you the heads up that I woke up this morning, I've written a script, and I woke up this morning and wasn't completely in love with what I was going to share today. So thank you for being here and joining me on the fly. Evan, I'm gonna challenge you. Can we actually set it so that people can come on camera? I just want to do a little interactivity to get us started. Sure. And also, if you could launch that first poll for me, it would be great.
You bet.
Again, my name is Chevon Powell. I am coming to you from Seattle, Washington, the land of the Coast Salish people, specifically the Duwamish. I actually currently reside in Houston, Texas, on the land of the Sana people. Today, I am going to center BIPOC, POC, BPOC. I use all of these terms really interchangeably, so just flow with it. And also, I would like to acknowledge that when I talk about these different communities and folks, we are intersectional folks. So I mean trans, non-binary, women, queer, differently abled, neurodivergent, low income, all of these things that all of these identities that we carry. So please hold on to that as we go through this. Tonight you might be here because you want to learn about the basics of diversity, equity, inclusion, any of those things. I'm just going to stop it right now. I am not going to go into the 101 of these things, but I did send Evan a few resources. So Evan, if you could drop those resources in the chat. Avarna Group is phenomenal, who does diversity like 101 and has a lot of tools and resources, as well as Joy Trip Project has an amazing anti-racism resource tool that they just launched. So please grab those links out of the chat and do some research, do a little bit of lead work, and get your own understanding of how you want to engage in this work. I launched the poll today just so I can kind of gauge who's in the room and how you define your identities. As we go through this evening, these things may come up again. So thank you for sharing via this poll. I'm going to be looking at my notes, even though I'm not fully going off of all of them. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about me, my experience, and my work, as well as challenge you to reflect and do some small group talks, as well as we'll have a Q&A at the end. I'm also going to start by saying I do not represent all thoughts for all Black folks, for all BIPOC folks. I am representing the thoughts of Chevon and Golden Brooks events. Again, I appreciate being brought into this space, and I want to start by sharing a quote. If you have come here to help me, you're wasting your time. But if you have come here because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let's get to work. And that's by Lily Watson, an Indigenous Australian artist, activist, and academic. So that's where I want to start things. But we can close that poll. Thank you for that, Evan. I'm gonna start with a little, oh, awesome, sweet. I'm gonna click out of that. I would love to start by asking you a few questions, but I want to give you one word first, and that word is unbelievable. Now, I'm going to ask you all to raise your hands for this activity. So I'm going to start with who all here went to a summer camp? All right, a few people. Who all here has been pulled over by the police? Keep your hands up if you could. Okay, most people. All right, this should get everybody. Who all here likes outdoor recreation? All right, everybody's hands up. Keep your hand up for me for a second. Now keep your hand up if you have been pulled over by the police and questioned about your outdoor recreation activities. All right, I see that most people but Tammy, sorry, Tammy, put their hands down. Just a little background about me. When I was 3 years old, I started attending a camp for burn survivors. It was a community space that people look like me. I'm a burn survivor of 38 years. I was burned when I was 5 months old, and I was fortunate enough to have a camp, an outdoor camp that brought youth together to be around folks that look like them and get outside. We canoed, we hiked, we did all sorts of things. And that was like my introduction into the outdoors. Fast forward a few years, you know, more like 30 plus years, I went on my first solo backpacking trip to Stove, Vermont. And when I arrived, I was pulled over by the police. They questioned why I was in the area. I told them my hiking shoes are in the back seat, my pack is in the trunk, because as most of us on this video call today know, that gear is expensive and I did not want it to be stolen. So it was in the trunk of my car, and he told me that my story was unbelievable. He went as far to call backup, and then it continued to tell backup that my story was unbelievable. It took a little while, but I was finally let go. And I will say, as my voice still quivers to this day, and it's been about 6 years since that happened. It was one of the most traumatic things. And I'm a burn survivor. So knowing that my safety was at risk because I wanted to go outside and do an activity that I had so long loved, it changes a person. After that situation was over, I just thought to myself, well, what can I do to impact change? I'd been an event planner for over 20 years, so I thought, oh, well, let me put on an event. So I went to the community and gauged what they would want from an experience, and I got to work building that. And that was in 2018 when we launched the Refuge Outdoor Festival, which is a camping experience geared toward BIPOC folks, inclusive of everyone, building community in the outdoors via outdoor recreation, conversations, art, and music. I wanted to create a safer space because that night in Vermont, it was not a safe space for me as a plus size Black woman trying to get outside and just live my life. So what does that have to do with diversity? It has everything to do with diversity. I'm here to talk to you all so that we can all work together to break down some systems of oppression so that more Black, brown, and other people of color feel safe and comfortable being outside. I'm going to go through a few things, a few myths about the outdoors. And then we'll have some time for everyone to have their own reflection of what myths or what systems of oppression, what things are impacting BIPOC folks that we might all be upholding some notions that are not serving us. That's when we'll break out into, we'll have a little time for everybody to go off camera and do some self-reflecting, and then have some conversations in your small groups. And also, please feel free to drop any questions you might have in the chat. I'm going to back up a little bit to that police incident. You know, after that police incident, I will say that I was changed. My relationship with the outdoors was changed. I went public. I went public with being an outdoor person. For so many years, I had been, if you know me, and I know a few people, few faces on this screen tonight, if you knew me, I was always a walker, an avid walker. I will walk in any country for long distances. I was at parks. I was just outside, but people didn't see me as a part of the outdoors, which is interesting because I had also moved to Seattle because I passed through the city and saw mountains, trees, and water. And within 24 hours, I made the decision that I was going to live in Seattle. I worked at REI as an event planner, planning corporate events for one of the largest outdoor recreation companies in the world. But yet and still, those police did not see me as part of the outdoors. In fact, my coworkers at REI didn't see me as part of the outdoors and went as far as to ask, was REI my introduction to the outdoors when I started there? Absolutely not. I want to challenge the way that people perceive BIPOC folks in the outdoors. And all of my work is to change the narrative of who belongs there and our safety in the outdoors. I use the tool of events because frankly, I love them. And I'm gonna say this far-fetched thing, events can change the world. I know some people might disagree with that, but how many people here have heard of Woodstock? How many people have heard of the March on Washington? You've even heard of Coachella, even with all of the problematic cultural appropriation that happens there. We know these things, and we know that these things can change the way that our society views people and views the systems that we're all living in. So like I said, I want to do a little bit of myth busting. And my first myth that I want to bring up is your definition of the outdoors is not universal. So I know that, you know, the thing about the outdoors, a lot of people have been like, I'm going to conquer, I'm going to do this. Well, that is actually not the way that everyone perceives the outdoors, and it might not even be your perception, but a lot of times it's really not the way that BIPOC folks approach the outdoors. And to take it even further, let's think about language. When we hear that definition of outdoors, you think of hiking. Guess what? I didn't learn the term hiking until 10 years ago when I moved to Seattle. I had done all that walking and exploring in the outdoors, but didn't know the term hiking. We also live in a multicultural society here in the US. And many other languages do not have the same words for the things that we do in the outdoors. And we have to take a step back and realize the way that we view the outdoors may not be the way that someone else views the outdoors, or even the language that they use around their outdoor access. And for a lot of, and I want to also bring up, for me and a lot of other BIPOC folks, the outdoors is about healing and about connection to Mother Nature. And that could be also for anybody, but in particular, those from more oppressed and marginalized communities have found survival and healing and restoration in outdoor access. So just be mindful of the myth of your way of doing the outdoors is the only way. None of us can own that for other folks. Myth number 2, and I want to ask you all to raise your hands. How many people here have heard the saying, Black people or BIPOC folks aren't outdoorsy? And please tell the truth if you've ever heard that saying. Okay, I see a number of hands going up there. Let me just say this, we would not have made it to 2021 if someone in our lineage or us were not outdoorsy. And when I say outdoorsy, I actually don't use the term for outdoorsy for myself. I like to be outside. And there's a reframing when you say outdoors and outside. To BIPOC folk in particular, outside there's always some sort of connection. It might have been you walking to school. Guess what? That's outside. You're part of the outdoors because you're outside. At the very first, and I want to give a quick shout out to Outdoor Asian. I see a few folks from that organization represented here today. They have been an amazing partner of Golden Bricks and the Refuge Outdoor Festival since we came into an existence. In the first year of the Refuge Festival, they actually facilitated a community conversation around our histories as BIPOC folks and what in our own family lineage was outside. And there were such beautiful stories of people foraging with their grandmother, but not knowing the term foraging until more recently. There were stories of families camping. There were all these beautiful expressions of the outdoors, but sometimes people had to be guided to that because we've so long been, I will say a lot of BIPOC people have been in hiding that they are a part of the outdoors and a part of this community. The third myth that I would like to bust for everyone is nature doesn't discriminate. Well, yes, okay, nature doesn't discriminate. Water, trees, that doesn't discriminate, but the people in nature do. And there are way too many instances. My incident happened many years ago, but I know of things as recent as this summer. As you all heard, we launched Refuge Festival in 2018. We were super excited. This year we got to host a small COVID-safe Refuge Festival, and we do a lot of work to try to create a safer space for our community. Unfortunately, the folks around that space made it unsafe. And we had multiple racist incidents during the weekend that we were camping out for the Refuge Festival. So it's fresh that no, nature doesn't discriminate, but people do. And we're still working through that and working with our partners to address some of those things in that area. But it's also heartbreaking to know that some people will continue to say, well, nature doesn't discriminate. So why even have a conversation around diversity? Why even bring up the fact that I'm a different race than so-and-so, or, BIPOC this? It's because it's not always safe for us. And that was an example and a reminder that we have so much more work to do. Before we transition into reflection time and things like that, and I want to give you all some space to think about what are the myths that you are currently upholding that are not serving the community as a whole and being a more diverse and inclusive outdoor community. I want to acknowledge that we are in a triple pandemic. And when I say triple pandemic or triple crisis, let me say that we have COVID, we have this racial reckoning that's happening across the country, and now we're in an economic downturn. Now is the time to really dig in and find your voice, find your space and connection and community to address these systems that are not serving all of us. We want to come out of all of these things in a better, wholer way. Wholer is not a word, but y'all get what I'm saying. So that is the meat of what I wanted to say, but I want us to all spend some time, and we'll break into small groups, and I want you to have a conversation in community, but I want you to take a moment, and I'm going to encourage you to go off screen and think about those things that are not serving in community, the myths that are still being upheld. I, as of probably 2 weeks ago, heard someone say, "Oh, I'm so surprised you do that. Black people don't camp and Black people don't hike." What are the things that you have heard, and maybe it's specific to your community, that is a myth or something that is not serving to continue to uphold that you think that we need to work on breaking down. And I also want you to spend some time and really start envisioning what future you want as we come out of this triple crisis, as in regards to diversity, not just in the outdoors, but in community. We are in America and we are going to continue to be a diverse community. How can you challenge yourself to envision a different way of being, a different way of interacting? I just want to say, as you should remember, I mentioned the word unbelievable. What are the ways that we can make other BIPOC people's experience believable? So that's your third question that I want you to think about when you have some time to reflect. And in your breakout rooms, I'll drop some questions in the chat, but I want you all to spend just a few minutes. One, think about the myths or the ways of operating that are not serving in community. Two, what future are you truly envisioning? Three, what are the ways that we can make other BIPOC people's experiences in the outdoors believable? I want you to write down a few notes as well, because I've skipped around. 1 second, let me find my right piece of paper. This is what happens when you rewrite your speech the day that you're giving it. Good night. And then I printed it poorly. Oh, sweet. Just some notes. I encourage all of you to do your work. And when I say your work, it's personal development and personal, we talk about inclusion without recognizing that we've all built systems of exclusion. So what are the things that you need to change in your life to make it a more inclusive way of being? And I'm going to just give you a few recommendations. One, do your work. These are some good resources. Listen to folks with different life experiences, build community with them, then listen some more. And if you have the means to help redistribute resources, do it. And that can be financial, but that could be access to lands that someone doesn't have access to. That could be access to outdoor equipment. There are so many different ways that we as individuals can impact and change the way that the outdoor diversity issue is. So that's one. Two, I would like you to all acknowledge and challenge power dynamics. Do not be a gatekeeper in this work. Become a powerful ally or co-conspirator, accomplice, whatever term you want to use. Maybe you're not in a position of power, but know that each of us live with a set of privileges, and sometimes we need to use those privileges to uplift other people. And then lastly, don't be ashamed to say you don't know what you don't know. But also do not, when you don't know, do not overburden and do not overtax folks that are already marginalized. Each of us that hold a marginalized identity, be it BIPOC, be it women, be it LGBTQ, we are all taxed with additional burdens when people don't know. There's nothing wrong with saying you don't know, but don't expect that person to do the research and the work that you need to do for yourself. So that is all that I wanted to share here now. I did want to leave room for us to go into breakout rooms, have some reflection on our own, and then come back, do a little bit of group sharing out, because you're going to learn and hear some interesting things in these breakout rooms. One of the things I would like to ask is, share your own stories. Don't share the stories of others or the experiences of others. I would also like to say that I'm going to stay in the main space here. So if anyone needs to talk to me, or if anyone feels like it's not the space for them to be in a breakout room, feel free to come back to the main area. I'm going to Evan, can we give about 15 minutes in the breakout rooms? I don't want us to be in there too long, but I'm going to encourage you to share everyone to share name, pronoun, and then at least one myth or one way that you think that you can change something that would be impactful and uplifting other marginalized communities. It doesn't necessarily have to be BIPOC specific, but other marginalized identities.
Yes, absolutely. I can create the breakout rooms now, and
Awesome.
then we'll put the questions in the chat for the breakout rooms, correct?
Yes.
Okay, here we go. And I can remove you, Chevon, from this one.
Awesome.
Actually, I think you're going to have to do that once you go in there.
Okay.
Okay, here we go. You should all have invitations to the breakout rooms. I'm going to pause the recording.
Sweet. I think we are all back. So I wanted to see if there were any folks from the different rooms that wanted to share anything interesting or impactful that came up in your breakout rooms. I'll just go through the numbers because that might be quicker. So if anyone from the group one, you might have seen your group number when you went into the breakout room. So actually, let's just popcorn it. We'll give it about 5-10 minutes, and then we will go to Q&A at 8:30 or 6:30. Sorry, my computer is on Central Time. So if anyone wants to share anything that they have from their breakout room, you can just bring yourself off mute, I think.
I'll talk about in breakout room number 4. We were talking about how opportunities for outdoor exploration being available in public schools is one of the best things to sort of bring equity to experiences. You'll have students from all walks of life who bring different backgrounds and levels of experience and comfort with them. And then when they're all going on a field trip to get rained on, get muddy, walk around in creeks, raise fish, whatever, they're all kind of getting that exposure, and they may be starting from that, may be their first, or they may have, 8 years behind them of being out, outdoorsy people. But it's a nice place. It's a nice opportunity to make that opportunity, offer it with equity to who's ever in the public schools and, across a district or across the state. or cross, whatever, to give them all the opportunity to take it and run with it, or say no thank you.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. And I think, just to piggyback off of that, one of the things that I think will impact diversity and inclusion in the outdoors is having those experiences together. I say the folks that you had to survive with are the ones that you're closest with. Those are the ones that you recommend for jobs. Think about the times that you've went hiking with someone and something came up and you're like, ooh, actually, I've heard about this job that they might be perfect for. You just build such a different relationship when you're outside together. And I think starting that in schools is amazing. So thank you. Anybody else want to share?
May I just piggyback on that
Absolutely.
Lucy just spoke of? The YMCA is also a place to maybe reach out for some of these exploration type classes, inclusive exploration type. Anyways, just thought about that because they're such a good resource. I'm sure you've thought about that too.
Yep. If you're in Seattle, you might want to look into Bold and Gold out of the YMCA. It's a really good outdoor program. All right. Anybody else want to share from their group?
Yeah, I'll share something.
Awesome.
So in my group, Lori said something that really, I'm still trying to think about it, but she was organizing events with Audubon, and somebody brought up that an open invitation doesn't necessarily feel open to everybody. And that keeps going through my mind about how, because I tend to organize hikes for women in the city that I'm in, and I just would love to have more people join, and I would love to know how to make people feel more welcome. And sometimes I'm wondering if people feel intimidated, or I'm not sure really, but
that's a good point. Thank you for sharing that. Be explicit. I tell people that all the time. People, when we first launched Refuge, people actually recommended that we not say that it was for BIPOC folks. And I said, I have to say it's for BIPOC folks because sometimes, especially when it comes to the outdoors and nature, there are all these things that are stopping us from. And I want you to know that this is for you. And so we explicitly say that it is for and geared toward Black, Indigenous, people of color, allies welcome. But that has been the biggest draw. Most people have said, I've never seen an outdoor event say that it was for us, by us. So I think that, challenging yourself to feel like be more explicit and say, like, I'm trying to build community with a more diverse audience. Yeah. And maybe even find someone that you can partner and share, work with that, work on that message together. Sweet. Yep, I see you there. There we go.
We talked about something similar in our group, the desire to make spaces or programs that we work in other areas of our lives welcoming to other populations, and how it doesn't seem to be working, and why that might be, and shared some of the various myths that other people have given, like, well, that particular population isn't interested in that activity because of this, or that particular population doesn't want to do that because they're scared of this, and how the reality might be that we're the problem, or that even just that those populations might know that the event that they might be coming to could very likely be mostly white, and that in and of itself might be enough to make somebody go, you know what, I can't. Or that there might be things that as a white person you might think is basic or default that might actually be off-putting or culturally specific, to somebody from another population. Like one of the examples that was shared was from my own culture is at Quaker meetings, older Quakers love to do square dancing. And there was this idea that square dancing isn't a white thing. Square dancing is it's a Quaker thing. And we had to have some of our BIPOC Quakers go, no, square dancing isn't Quaker, that's white. And when we come into a Quaker space and y'all are square dancing, we don't feel part of that. And when it was brought up and some of the older white Quakers went, but we need our square dancing, that sent an even stronger message to the BIPOC Quakers that the square dancing was more important than their participation. So that there might be things that you don't see as white culture that are barriers to being welcoming.
Thank you for that. Yep. I'm just gonna let that sit with the room. Yep.
Well, I would just want to piggyback off that 1 second, because she said barriers, and that was one of the things we talked about in our group. It was sometimes the level for entry or the barrier to entry is equipment or tickets, specifically with some sports like mountain biking or skiing or snowboarding. And one of the things we talked about were I forget who it was, but she brought up an event where they lend bikes, and I was like, that's a great event, but then in this group, we're like, well, maybe it's not geared towards the BIPOC community. So even if that event is there, maybe that community still isn't showing up. So it's just kind of I don't want to say a snowball effect, but at least the conversation's kind of opened my eyes to a few of these things. But I just wanted to throw in there that there are some barriers of entry to these sports into the outdoors. And that's an important hurdle, I think, for some people.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Chris, I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, so in our group, we talked about similar topics. The myth for us, it was the myth that only able-bodied people or people of certain profiles or skill sets can participate in certain activities. So my example was paddle sports, and I think others brought up hiking or just different outdoor activities. And then one of the things that came up was how can we change that? And part of our answer, my answer was, the first thing is access. Just that first time that someone can get out on the water can be life-changing. The second thing is equipment. If we're only designing equipment for certain body types or certain heights, there's a lot of, I take people on test paddles, but some of the kayaks aren't even built for the super tall or the super short. It's very much a slim profile of people. And if we can get a more diverse set of people in the engineering side and the design side and the leadership, outside of just marketing on a poster where they look different from the stereotypical mold, because I feel like we've seen a lot more marketing that is geared towards targeted audiences, but I don't know if that shift has translated to the leadership, people who are developing gear and products. But I think once we take that next step, you can really engage these other communities on a much more fundamental level, and really uplift their experience, right? I think there's a lot of rental things, and especially in the paddle sports, where it's like it's one type of boat, it's one type of stand-up paddleboard, and if it's uncomfortable for you, then people tell you this is just not the sport for you. But that's not true. There are many different kinds of designs. There just aren't available in the lowest or the most, the rental spaces where people are going to have the most opportunities to interact with paddle sports. So, yeah.
Thank you for that. Yeah, that's so important. And part of the thing that I skipped out on was, a lot of these systems are not built to serve us all. I was actually in the room and working at REI when they announced that they were expanding sizes. And I saw people getting emotional and crying because they had never been able to buy outdoor clothing at REI, but then when it rolled out, they referred to it as expanded sizes. And how demoralizing is that? We all have opportunity to challenge these organizations. I know you specifically talked about paddling, but these companies that are creating equipment and clothing that are not servicing us all. And even if you don't fit that mold, you can still challenge those organizations to rethink what they are sharing with the community, and those rental companies to expand their offerings. I know Seattle Bouldering Project and a few other climbing gyms have expanded so that they have harnesses and gear for plus size folks. That was not a thing, you know, even 5 years ago. And I think that we all have the opportunity to voice those issues when we see, or even if we don't necessarily see it, just think this, that's what this conversation was about today. Start thinking of the ways in the systems that are still being upheld, and figure out ways to challenge or use your voice. Becca, I see your hand raised as well, so I'll toss it to you.
Thank you. I'm listening and participating and also balancing my preschoolers' bedtime routine. So please interrupt me if someone already said this from group 2 or mini group. But one thing that we were talking about is the myth that to participate in outdoor activities that are kind of more gear heavy, or even just any kind of outdoor activity, you need, you know, the high end, the North Face raincoat, like the fancy equipment, and that's not always true. You can go hiking in so many different kinds of shoes. There's like so many brands that are less expensive, but still good quality of that kind of thing. So I think, and I'm guilty of this, not anymore because I've learned, but you know, when I was like in college and getting more outdoorsy and things, being out on the trail or camping and seeing, like, judging people based on their gear, which is not fair. So yeah, that was something we talked about.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Yeah. Yeah, we all do it. Like, you know, this work is not easy. It is messy. It's challenging. We're all going to make mistakes. And, you know, we've all created harm or caused harm, and not intentionally, but it happens. I've been where Becca was. I worked at REI, so I was real privileged to have access to gear at discounted rates, but also still very expensive. I haven't had to buy anything in the last 3 years since leaving there because I bought way too much while I was there. But yeah, I've been on a trail and judged someone for like being soaking wet because they didn't have the right rain gear on to be on a hike, or you know, I've also challenged folks to be like, oh, do you really want to wear those sandals? But also then thinking, you know, there's communities around the world that do more hardcore exploration in sandals and things like that. So who am I to judge that person and what their body needs? So yeah, that's a really important one to kind of really think through. We're down to our last 8 minutes, so I did want to just open up the floor for any questions that you all might have, any final thoughts you might have. I really appreciate everyone showing up here tonight and challenging yourselves to think through how can you make the outdoors more inclusive. But I do want to make sure that I open myself up. You can ask me anything you want in this last 8 minutes if you have any questions. And feel free to just take yourself off mute and ask the question or share something from your group, or if not, we will wrap it up.
I have a question.
There you go, Tina.
Yeah, I was going to chat it in, but where can we go for resourcing these ideas that we've brought forward in a sense where we can maybe build more on this? You know, how can we get in our communities and try to create that inclusivity in areas. And do you have a website? I saw the Refuge site, but do you have a website that you recommend that we go to see more, hear more, read more, listen more?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we put that in the chat. There is the Joy Trip Project, and they have a pretty extensive anti-racist guide, but they also have a number of other organizations on that list that you can go and learn more about and connect with. Diversify Outdoors is another good place to connect, as well as folks like Outdoor. I tell people all the time, this might be different for some folks, is Instagram. Go to Instagram and start following different organizations that are doing work in the outdoors. You will learn so much by just following these organizations, and you'll find out ways to help them in their mission and their work. I would also like to just say that, there's a big notion of we just want folks to have a seat at the table. And I really have started questioning access to seats at the table, because that sometimes does not change the power dynamics or the way that resources are shared. I totally encourage folks to allow BIPOC and other marginalized communities to build their own tables and to just share the resources that you might have access to with those organizations as they build and in and with community that they serve. It's not just having a seat at the table, isn't it? It's not worked this far, so let's try something different. All right. I see some people threw some things in the chat. What was the link with an A?
I think that's probably Avarna.
Yes. Avarna, yeah. Avarna Group is a good resource to learn more about diversity, equity, and inclusion, specifically in the outdoors. It's run by two amazing women. I think, Evan, you said you work with them as well.
Yeah, they did a diversity audit at the Cascades Institute.
They're pretty amazing at what they do. Yeah, with that being said, we're at our last 4 minutes. If no one else has any questions, I think,
I do. I hope this isn't too, I don't even know how to ask it, but somebody was discussing leave no trace, like in a group thing on Facebook, and then somebody else brought up, basically their exact words is leave no trace is racist.
Right.
And I'm just like trying to wrap my head around that one.
Yeah, I with the work that I do not actually encourage leave no trace practices, because the practices of leave no trace are actually not the way in which a lot of Indigenous communities interact with the outdoors. But there's been almost no wiggle room in those practices when it comes to Indigenous communities and also BIPOC communities. It really comes from a white preservation lens or white conservation lens, but that's not actually how the Native folks actually lived and operated on the lands, specifically here in the US. So leave no trace doesn't leave room for burning practices. It doesn't leave room for rituals that might need to happen in this space. I do believe in packing and pack out. Don't leave your trash in the backcountry or wherever else. That's not what I'm saying when I say I don't follow leave no trace practices. It's those other things that do not serve everyone in my community. And when I say my community, I mean the BIPOC community. Is that helpful?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
And I will say I am also, they have been challenged on that and the way that they approached it. And that's why a lot of people have started saying that it's racist. So I'm real transparent with that. Awesome. All right, well, I will give it back over to Evan, and thank you all so much for being here, being so present, being so willing to share your thoughts, even when, you don't know, what you don't know. So thank you for demonstrating that. And thank you all for coming on camera. I really love seeing everyone's faces. So thank you all so much. And for flowing with me as I just totally threw my script out the window. So thank you all so much.
Yeah, and I want to say thank you, Chevon, as we're seeing in the chat. I'm really happy this worked out. And it dawns on me too that this is just one conversation. There's so many more conversations to have, more action to take, more people to meet, more connections to make. So this is a really good way to support, I think, what I think should be, a practice for outdoors people. I wanted to make sure everybody knows that on November 27th, Chevon will be hosting Refuge Day. Is that correct? Yeah, okay, great. Refuge Day with Golden Bricks Events. Don't miss that. We have a couple more virtual programs coming up. Look at our website. We have a night with some poetry, and then toward mid-December, we have a night with Upper Skagit Elder Scott Schuyler. He'll be talking about tribal fish management, and we always really love having Scott speak with us. He's a very powerful person and really lighthearted and worth listening to. And again, the recording of this program, there's a question in the chat there about connecting with Refuge Day. The recording of this program will be available to you in a follow-up email that'll come to you from our registrar, and that might even happen as early as tomorrow. If you do get any follow-up questions about the program, you are welcome to email me. I'm at evan_Holmstrom@ncascades.org. I'll put that in the chat. And you can also email just the registrar who you got the email from about this program tonight. Typing and talking at the same time is kind of hard. Okay, that does it, folks. Thanks again for being here tonight, and I look forward to seeing you again, virtual program or maybe in person. Thanks so much. Take care. Be well, everybody.
Tina, I'm going to throw the link in the chat for you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Welcome. All right.
That was great.
Awesome.
Yeah, it went by fast.
It did. It did. It went by really fast, especially with, chatting at the end. I feel like more people probably would have said some other things, but I think we wrapped it up well. Now I get to go catch my red eye.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I fly. I had a doctor's. Yeah, I had a doctor's appointment this morning, and now I go and catch a red eye, but I have to go pack first.
Okay, well, I won't hold you up.
Yeah, awesome. I really enjoyed this. And I think, like you said, there can be many more conversations like